Okay, here we go. We started with trapezoids. We're going to continue. So take down these notes here on a separate piece of paper real quick. This will be actually easier. Trapezoids. Why is it so... Okay. Okay, part 2. Or for this worksheet 2, this is what you're going to see. Today you're going to see a special kind of trapezoid. It's not going to name it. I don't know why the worksheet doesn't name it. But there's another way that you can tell that it's this type of trapezoid. It's called an isosceles trapezoid. And you maybe remember this word isosceles because you learned an isosceles triangle. If you remember an isosceles triangle, I'll draw it over here. It's a triangle that has two congruent sides. And if these, right, this is an isosceles triangle. So it'll have this side and this side congruent, which means they'll be the same measure, right? And this is the little marks, right? If you see this mark and this mark, that means that's the congruency symbol, right? So if this is 8, well, this one's 8. But something else is true about isosceles triangles. If the sides are the same, then the base angles, these are going to be the same. And that's going to be kind of easier to figure out, right? When it's isosceles. You'll see that you'll have two congruent sides, right? The sides will be congruent. But you're gonna pretty much focus on the angles. This angle and this angle will be congruent. So if this is 50 degrees, well, then this one's 50 degrees. Okay. So taking it from there, I mean, that's kind of how they got, and how is this so zoomed out? I don't know why it's so zoomed out. Is it this? Hold on, let me get it right. Is that all it goes? Okay, now. That's kind of how they got an isosceles trapezoid. This is what they did. I mean, this is how it comes about. Oh, come on, focus. Okay. They actually did start like with an isosceles triangle like this, right, where these sides were congruent. And then all they did is they got this, you see this bottom side? All they did is they cut it somewhere. They cut off the top. They kind of cut off this top, but they cut it up where this line and this line are parallel. See, they took this part out. And see, here's my parallel lines. But see, these sides, because they were congruent, they're still congruent. Because you made the cut parallel to this one, and the sides were congruent before when you cut it parallel. The sides still are congruent. They're still the same. That's how they got it. Remember, a trapezoid has one pair of parallel sides, right? It has one pair of parallel sides. So now, let's say if this one is, again, if this one's like 80 degrees, well, now we're going to know this one. Now there is going to be a connection or a relation for this special type of trapezoid, only if it's isosceles. Only if it looks like that, right? This side and this side, they're not parallel. They're not parallel. But if this is 80 degrees, then this one will be 80 degrees. And you can kind of think of it like this. Like if you were to think about symmetry and if you were to cut it right down the middle, you'd be able to fold it over, right? And see it'll overlap perfectly. It'll overlap perfectly. Okay, so it's kind of like it's a perfect shape, a perfect type of a trapezoid. You can cut it right down the middle. This one's 80 and this one's 80. But then what else holds true? Remember from before? If these lines are parallel, then these add up to what? These will still be adding up to what? These angles here add up to what? Add to 180 degrees. So guess what? Honestly, on an isosceles trapezoid, you really only need to know one angle, and you can actually find all of them. If I started off with this one, and I know this one's 80, this base angle, right? These are the base angles. You kind of have one pair of base angles here, and they also call these a base angles up here. But if I start with this 80 degrees, then I also know that this one's 80 degrees when it's isosceles, when it is isosceles. And then I can see the parallel lines go this way, and from before we've known that what? Those will add up to 180, so this is 80, this angle here is 100, and again, then these base angles are the same. They're congruent. Yeah? So you'll have isosceles trapezoids that look this way, or they can be going this way as well. Right, this one is if like the triangle's kind of upwards, but remember, you won't see this part. So you can also have them looking this way. Again, you'll have one pair of parallel lines like this, and then these will look like this. It's gonna look like it's almost like a triangle, but remember the peak, the top, or that little pointy part got cut off. But if they don't tell you in words that it's isosceles, what's another way they can show you that it's an isosceles without saying it? They're gonna mark these like this. You'll see these markings. That's what you're gonna see. This side is congruent to this side. But if that's true in an isosceles, and remember, here's my parallel sides. Here, this one's parallel to this one. Okay? So again, you only need to know one angle. If this is, let's say this one's 120 degrees, or remember the base angles are congruent. Remember, it's like you can fold it in half. See, it's a perfect shape in that way. You can fold it in half, and this angle will overlap to this one, just like the sides will all match and everything overlaps. If this is 120, then I'd know this one's 120. Yeah? And then now we go back to knowing about, because of the fact that these are parallel lines, remember now this way they add up to what? Again, to 180. These add up to 180. So 120 plus 60. These base angles are congruent. Oh, I should have wrote over here. Base angles congruent. But you actually have this pair of base angles and these pair of base angles. Okay? So that's 60, that means this one's 60. Okay, let's look at the first set of problems here. And that'll be it for this first video, and then I'll do the rest in the second video. Okay, there's a printout, there's a worksheet that I included. If you're able to print it out, great. It looks like this. It says worksheet 2 trapezoids notes. But you know what? You might want to, again, if you have to pause it, you can pause this video anytime. But remember, honestly, for all of these, if you see the congruency symbols, which you will on all of these. These are actually isosceles. They'll be isosceles trapezoids, okay? All right, so copy this first one, pause it if you haven't, then pause it now, and then just press play when you're ready to move on and you copied it. Okay, so here on this assignment, it's only going to ask you for one, but honestly, you should be able to find all of them. So if these sides are congruent, then the base angles are congruent. So that's 130. This one's 130. And I know it's not asking you for these over here, but remember, if these lines are parallel, then this way, these same side angles add up to 180. So that means that this one's going to be 50. And this one's going to be 50, right? Because 130 plus 50 is 180. Okay, simple as that. Number 2. Again, here's how you know that it's an isosceles trapezoid. I got a base angle here of 70, so where's the other base angle? Right here. This one's also 70. Okay, good. Does that mean that opposite angles are the same? No, only the base angles. Only the base angles are congruent for an isosceles trapezoid. How will you find the other one like that? Well, remember, parallel lines, it has one pair of parallel lines. These add up to 180. So this has to be what? 110. This is also going to be 110. Yeah? Okay. Couple more right here. Oh, this one's almost similar. This base angle here is 110, so that means that this one right here is also 110 because they're congruent. And these add up to 180, right? Because these are the parallel lines, right? These are the two parallel lines, so you're going to look this way. So again, this is going to be 70. This is going to be 70. Because this way they have to add up to 180. Okay, last one for this video. How about this? There it is. Here's your markings that it's an isosceles trapezoid. Remember, it only has one pair of parallel sides. But if the sides are congruent, the base angles are congruent, the bottom ones and the top ones. But first, let's start with what we have. This one's 75, that makes this one 75. And these are not going to be 75, but now see, these add up to what? 180. 180 take away 75 is 105. Okay, so just know for this type of trapezoid, the base angles you put congruent to each other this way. All right. This way, the way the parallel lines are, that's still true that it adds up to what? That's the same as before, like the parallelograms, and that's still, that information is still the same. All right, there's another video where you'll see the a little bit more challenging problems, but this is the understanding for isosceles trapezoid. Okay, go to the next video.